Hello and welcome everybody to the Let's Talk HR show with myself, Jack Nolan, and Mags Kerns, a professional HR person who's going to tell us all today about HR, everything mental health, everything exciting and interesting to hopefully engage you guys and give you a lot of value today with what we're sharing. So Mags, what does HR mean to you?
Well, HR, I saw this, these funny memes that you see going around. Well, I saw this one once, I thought, God, that just sums up my job. And it was like, the unofficial definition of HR is psychologist, peacekeeper, detective, lawyer, personal coach, event planner. And I just thought, yeah, that is pretty much what we do. And although it was intended as a joke, I thought, there's such an element of truth to that. We are very multi-skilled type people. We have a lot of responsibility that are very, very varied. And so I think that kind of sums up HR in a bit of a nutshell. And although it was meant as a joke, I think there is a good element of truth in it. But to be a bit more serious, I do think the landscape of HR has changed massively, particularly in the last 10 years and even more so the last 18 months, as we all know, because of COVID. So yeah, I mean, I think the biggest things I think we see that have changed is moving towards like driving up the employee experience and making workplaces a far more appealing place for people to work. And that, all the kind of employee engagement agenda, all that side of it, making sure that people's talents and that aspirations are met. They have somewhere they work that those can be met. And it's really important that employers, respond to that. So that's a big part of the HR agenda now. Making sure you've got a really appealing EVP, which is your employee value proposition. So making sure that you are appealing in the candidate market as a great place to work, which is becoming increasingly important because the candidate market is so kind of candidate led at the minute. So employers really have to push the boundaries to make sure that when candidates are looking at companies to work for, you're kind of like, hey, come and look at us, and this is why. So we've got to be really responsive and ahead of the game on that one. And just things like, your CSR agenda, making sure that's authentic as well, not just a tick box for likes of your shareholders, keeping them happy and making your website look nice and kind of appealing. It's got to be something that is lived and breathed throughout an organisation. And just making sure that employees find coming to work an enjoyable experience and making sure that they're mentally and emotionally and physically feeling good and happy about working and coming to work every day. Of course, there's the amount of transactional stuff that HR get involved in, and anyone watching this who works in HR will know what I'm talking about without me even having to go into it. But of course, there's that side of it, and that bit of it will never go away. But I do think, nowadays the HR agenda has changed quite significantly to being a much more kind of progressive, proactive kind of landscape.
That's amazing, and you've mentioned a lot of hot topics there within that nice little monologue, as you could say, of just expressing yourself, and it's really positive and very powerful stuff you just mentioned. So I hope the audience do take a lot away from what you just said then. And it's almost like, well, what I'm gathering, what I've been learning from talking to a lot of HR people is that, like, as yourself, Mags, I feel like you've got that motherly sort of vibe and energy about you. So I feel like you must be like a parent almost to some of your employees and colleagues. You know what I mean? Because of all the stress that you've been through with COVID, I'm sure you've been having to deal with a lot on that element to be able to say, it's going to be all right, we're going to get through it together. And as well as guiding and mentoring where you want your employees to go, your colleagues, because like they're coming to you and they want, like you said, they want progression, they want to develop themselves, they've got that ambition. For some of your employees and colleagues who are, ambitious, and you want to support them with their goals and their dreams, essentially, in becoming the best version of themselves within the company, to essentially bring more value as a unit that you have together. So again, massively respect there to what you're saying. Like, it's really great. Moving on to my next question is, I'm not sure if you covered just a little bit then, but inspired and influenced you to work within HR?
Well, it started when I left school. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do when I left school, but I knew it was something business-wise, but I don't think school kind of equips you to understand what the world of business is all about. So I chose to do a kind of general business degree at university, which I did. And as part of that, I was very lucky. I managed, they do a 6-month industrial placement, and I actually got a place with the BBC in London. working within HR. So that was my first dipping my toe in the water within the HR world from an experiential point of view, as opposed to studying it. And I just thought, yeah, this is definitely what I want to do. So I finished my degree, did my CIPD qualification, and have worked in HR roles ever since. Started on a graduate trainee scheme with one company, and I've worked in quite a variety of industries. Since then, I've worked in broadcasting, pharmaceuticals, where else? Manufacturing, business and finance, so banking and finance. So I've got quite a broad range of experience. But yeah, I mean, I think, as I said to you earlier, it's the variety of tasks and challenges that HR bring me that appeal, that have kept me in HR. And also, I think it's the fact that it's such a unique role within any business, because you're the one person within an organisation that can impact every single different part of the business and every single person who works there. I mean, that's a real privilege, but it's also, you know, it's a challenge as well, don't get me wrong, but it's very unique from that. And just what you were saying earlier about, you know, you kind of the mother figure, the kind of like making sure everyone feels all right from a kind of pastoral point of view, but then also obviously there's a very kind of not strict, but the kind of more kind of business focused side of things that you have to be able to do. So, I mean, and I think what you bring to the table will very much depend at that time on what is going on in the business. So say, for example, you're going through a massive organisational change programme, what that requires of the HR professional in the business is one set of, you know, skills and knowledge and experience, as opposed to, say, driving up employee engagement, say following an employee engagement survey. This sort of skill set and knowledge and experience and tasks that are involved in that are very, very different. So you kind of have to be a bit of a kind of a jack of all trades, really, and it brings, you know, a whole different set of skills and requirements and challenges. So yeah, it's and that's why I've enjoyed HR so much. I mean, it just brings all that you know, that variety that kind of keeps you stimulated, and you're never bored working in HR.
Yeah, that's great. That's really great to hear, Mags, honestly. Well, I'm going to bring up the mother card again. You've got to be. I think you work with your colleagues as a bit of a strict mother. You know what I mean? Like, you're lovable, but at the same time, you've got that respect there, where everyone's got to obey that and respect that you as a professional moving forward in the company. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I do sort of relate to that element. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I love it. So moving.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, it's a fine balance between the two. You know, you've kind of got that nurturing kind of making sure employees feel respected and valued and cared for, but equally, you know, you are a businesswoman, and at the end of the day, you've got to kind of help the business achieve its goals in the best possible way. So it is very much a balancing act, and, you know, it brings both elements to the picture. So you're absolutely right with that, Jack. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Mags. Well, you know, moving on to my next question is, why did you choose to work in your current organisation?
Well, I've actually gone on a bit of a detour with my career very recently, and I'll kind of tell you the story that, you know, I've worked in HR over 20 years, and, you know, we've talked earlier in this conversation about the kind of progressive side of HR. There's lots of, you know, great, you know, kind of new age thinking in terms of what employing people is all about. But I think it can't go without mention that HR can be a really tough gig for people who work in the HR arena. You know, not just by nature of the fact you've got things like, you know, disciplinary matters and grievances and investigations, which are always highly emotionally charged, just by definition of what you're doing. And, you know, if there's a huge organisational change programme going on, you're often the one that walks into a room full of people telling them their roles are all at risk of redundancy. And, you know, you might get helping someone drive up their performance in a particular area, and they come back saying they feel they're being bullied, where the intention hasn't been just to help them improve their performance. But, you know, so it can be very emotionally kind of draining, taxing, you know, and you know, what I've actually seen of late, I'm in quite a few HR networks. So, and there are things like Facebook groups where, you know, HR professionals get together to share best practice and ideas and help each other with problems and challenges, which is brilliant. I'm also in a couple that are like local to where I work, you know, and so we actually physically meet up, and been a great source of support to each other, particularly during COVID, where we all had no clue what was going on. But in that arena, I'm hearing more and more people talk about the overwhelm, the burnout, the sheer kind of pressure and kind of disillusion that people are beginning to feel with the HR arena. And understandably so, particularly with COVID, when on top of everything that they have to deal with, they were very much the go-to person in an organisation during COVID, at, when they were, for want of a better word, clueless, because it had never happened before. There was nowhere to look up and say, what do you do in terms of this? But yet they were being, kind of put pressure in terms of come up with policy and strategy and advised managers and people what to do. So it's been a really taxing and difficult time. And I know mental well-being and mental health is something that's very, very dear to your heart, and it is to me as well. And I did get to a point where I started to see signs of burnout in myself, and I thought, you know what, I need to do something about this, but I want to make it a positive thing. So I actually worked with a coach, a personal development coach, and spoke to them about this. And it kind of got to the point where I had these kind of beliefs stripped away, and kind of really thought hard and fast about, what do I want out of life? Is this what you want going forward? And if it's not, what do you want? And basically, it was a bit of a magical experience. It kind of really changed my whole perspective. And to cut a long story short, partway through the process, I had a bit of epiphany, and I've actually decided to set up my own online coaching business, specialising in helping HR professionals who are in that space where they feel overwhelmed, burnt out, disillusioned, they're struggling with and I've actually done my coaching accreditation now. It's taken me 6 months. I'm partly qualified as an NLP master practitioner. I've just got a few more weeks to go with that, and I'm launching a business, and it's to kind of give back to the HR community, and ensure the health and well-being of people in my profession, and supporting them with what is a tough gig. And because I've worked in that industry and worked in that role, I can feel their pain. I know exactly where they're coming from. I can relate to them, and hopefully that is something that's that's going to be my life going forward. That's something I'm really looking forward to doing. So still in the HR arena, but just more on the kind of health and well-being, particularly the mental side of it, specific to that. So
that's brilliant, Mags. Honestly, I thank you for sharing your vulnerability there, because I know it's a hard thing to do, especially on a podcast like this, you know what I mean, where you might have someone listening who could benefit from what you've just said, you know what I mean? So being vulnerable is a massive strength, in my opinion, and in my belief. So well done, and congratulations for being so strong, because you've got it, you've got what it takes, and I have all the faith in you that you will push forward your business, your new venture, and make a success of it. So, keep going and keep being the best version of yourself, Mags. Which moves nicely onto my next question is, how important is mental health and emotional well-being of the workforce?
Well, for me, as I've said already, it's massive. It should be absolutely up there as top of the agenda for any employer. And it has to come from the top, it has to be driven from the top, and it has to be authentically driven from the top. So I think that's first and foremost, it has to be there. I think that, a lot of companies, you see, they are doing some things, like, for example, they might have an EAP, an employee assistance program, there for employees to tap into. But I find that that's there for the people who have fallen through the cracks, that have got to the point where their mental well-being has got to a point where the difficulties have got to a point where they need help. And that's good that companies have got that, and it's there for the people who need it at that point. But my belief is that it should be starting far earlier than that. It should be preventative, and stopping it happening in the first place. And that is my belief about mental well-being. It should be absolutely about making it part of everyday conversation, and something that's normalised and not stigmatised. And I think it's getting there. I think we are seeing lots of changes out there, but I do think it's something that has to be done often, all the time. Little is often, and often is much better than like a 1 week campaign because it's Mental Health Awareness Week, and bingo, we've done that, tick that box, right, we'll come back to it next year. No, it has to be done all the time, every day, and part of everyday conversation.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. Like, we need that positive charge, and that stigma to be disappearing very soon, hopefully, but it is very present. So I understand why people don't want to talk, why people are holding it all in, because they've got these professional perceptions that they're superheroes, but actually a superhero does have an Achilles heel, and we need to share them Achilles heels so we can be exceptional human beings, be caring, empathy, and be able to share with each other what makes us human. You know what I mean? Because if you can't share, then how can we be able to move forward in a positive way and support each other and know what each other's independent needs are, in my opinion. So again, moving on to my next question, which is all about strategy. So what strategies have you found beneficial to support your employees' well-being and development?
Well, I mean, I think we've touched on that already. It's first of all, making sure it's driven from the top. Absolutely has to be the case. And I think, as I say, normalizing it, taking away the stigma. And I do think that, there's a few very simple measures you can put in place within an organization to make sure that happens. And, there's things like, getting employees involved in the dialogue, in the conversations, through kind of breakout groups, whatever. There's lots of kind of inventive ways that you can do that, and getting them developing the strategies from within the organisation, from the people themselves. I think another thing is to get rid of this badge of honour that is, I'm burned out. It's, too many people see that as a bit, I'm working X number of hours a week, 80 hours a week, it's all kind of like, aren't I the superhero? No, you're not. That has to stop, and it has to, kind of, not the company I work for now, but the company I worked for before. If I sent an email at the weekend, the MD would, to him, or he was in the copy of it, he'd ring me on the Monday morning and say, why did you send that at the weekend? What was going on? Why? And that was brilliant, because every time I wanted to send an email at the weekend, I wouldn't do it, because I knew he'd ring me, and I thought that was perfect, and that came from the top. And I know he didn't just do that with me, he did it with everyone, and it just stopped us doing it. He said, you finish at 5 o'clock on a Friday, what are you doing? So that was great. So I think stopping that happening. And I think things like very much so equipping the line managers to be comfortable to have conversations with their team members. So, getting them to recognise signs, because people won't always open up and talk about it, even if they're asked, that there's signs that you can recognise and learn to look for and learn to see. And and I've even thought of things like, when you have your one-to-one discussions, just your regular updates with your team members, always asking the question, how's things? How's your mental health? How are you feeling? You've got things going on outside of work? How's things in work? Talk to me about it. And then ask twice, because very often you'll get the, oh, I'm fine. No, really, tell me if there's anything going on. I'd really like to know. And then equip them to be able to respond positively to the answers they get. If they are, well, actually, yes, I have got a few things going on around, I have found I'm struggling lately, so that they feel comfortable and confident to be able to field questions. So it could be that, the response is, you're signposted elsewhere, but, hopefully it just makes managers feel equipped to deal with it, because, it is a whole new arena for a lot of line managers, but you can help them be able to deal with that. And I think they're the ones that are key within a business to make sure that that's dealt with. And I think other strategies, you can do lots to kind of improve social interaction at work. Quite often, a few simple measures, things like your bake-offs, and it doesn't have to be going out and booking expensive parties. It can just be doing social activities in work, sort of interdepartmental kind of competitions for the the World Cup football, just stuff like that. It just builds kind of morale and teamwork, and a sense of camaraderie that can go a long way to perhaps people that are feeling they don't have that outside of work, say. And so I think and just the usual, lots of visibility around your workplaces of posters, notice boards, things in the canteens, on the intranet, regular stuff. But as I said, little and often is way better than once a year, and that's how I've done our bit on mental well-being for the year. So yeah, these are not rocket science things. They're quite simple.
That's brilliant. Honestly, like fire. That's the word I'm going to describe that wisdom with. Fire. Absolutely on point. Like sharing that wisdom then was just like so refreshing to hear, because it's really good to hear that there's people like yourselves in HR who have all these strategies, who have all these tools, and are actually applying them instead of just thinking about it all. I can see that you're someone who actually takes action on the ideas that you have, which is massive. And that needs to be encouraged throughout HR and throughout all companies who are listening into this podcast as we speak. So again, thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm going to take that on board, you know what I mean? I've learned something from you today, you know what I mean? So I really appreciate that learning experience. So coming on to my last question, my last but not least question is, in your experience, what have you found creates great leadership within teams?
Well, Leadership. Oh gosh, where can I start with that one? I saw this kind of quote once, and it really hit home with me in terms of kind of summing up leadership. And it said, sort of like, poor leaders will leave me feeling like they think they're important. Great leaders will leave me feeling that they think I'm important. And I thought it's such a subtle difference in words, but such a huge difference in kind of impact. And I think, that kind of sums it up to me. But to go into a bit more detail, I think leadership's about, you've got your standard things that I would say are standard, like your commercial acumen, vision, critical thinking, strategic thinking. Yeah, if you get to leadership level, these things should be as standard. I think what makes a great leader stand out is probably the things that are a bit more on the emotional intelligence side of things. So you've got things like honesty, integrity, empathy, vulnerability, being able to show vulnerability. And I think, leaders that can be available, accessible, and, encourage people to challenge them and not be afraid of being challenged, and, will not run away from kind of difficult conversations. Get out there, speak to everybody at all levels of the organization, and listen. When I talk about communication, the biggest part of communication, I think, is listening. And when I say listening, I don't mean waiting for your turn to speak in the conversation or thinking what you're going to say next. Actually listening and absorbing what people are saying to you. I don't think people have learnt that skill enough. Me included. It's something that is so massive. But I think good leaders are ones that listen and absorb and take on board and react to what people are saying at every level of the organisation. So I think it's a process. Leaders, it's a skill. These are all skills that you can develop. I mean, some people have them innately more so than others, but I think these are all skills that can be learned. But I think the starting point is to recognise that those are the skills to be developed and will make you stand out as a great leader, and will make that difference in the organisation or business that you work in.
That's brilliant. Like, that's really refreshing and self-empowering to hear that, all the key things that you mentioned then, such as, like clear communication and the vulnerability, for a leader, at the top of the game in the career, running as a CEO, for example, in the company, if they're strong enough to stand in front of all their employees and say, listen, I've had a really bad day. I didn't get to sleep last night. The kid was crying. My wife was doing me head in, or whatever it might have been. You know what I mean? Or my husband or whatever. I'm not, but yeah, for them honest conversations to be had are important, because it makes everyone be able to relate to that leader and to be able to say, actually, he gets me. You know what I mean? And that self-empowerment is really important to be ran all the way through an organisation for that. The self-belief, that self-motivation, that self-everything, that independence as employees, not to just go to, yourselves with problems, but with solutions to them problems. You know what I mean? That self-thinking, that actually say to Mags, here's the problem, but I figured it out. So what do you think? Can I get you go ahead or not? You know what I mean? If we're moving forward, that sort of thinking is massive as well. And that comes from the leaders from the top all the way down to the bottom. You know what I mean? So Mags, we've come to the end of the podcast, which I'm gutted about, because I've enjoyed chatting to you, and I could chat to you all day, and I could probably chew your ear up and do your heading. But for the audience's sake, I'm going to wrap it up now and say thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for all the listeners who are listening in. Hope you have an amazing day, and I will see you all again soon in another podcast shortly. Take it easy and take care for now. Thank you. Bye.